So any way to guess how long it's going to be out? Uh-huh. Crew's on the job. Lots of lines down. Okay, well, thanks. Well, I had been planning on doing a show about traditional baking. What the heck? Electricity isn't exactly traditional, is it? In fact, this is the original kitchen. The hearth, which of course is Latin for focus. Now, I hate to tell you, but this altar to the god of fire isn't here just so you've got a place to snuggle with your sweetie while enjoying soft hits, okay? It was once the focus of every home from cave to castle, and up to a couple of hundred years ago, this is where all the cooking got done. In my house, for now at least, it seems that we will return to those days. Baking, sans electricity. It's not just crazy talk, it's... Although I often grill right inside the fireplace, most hearth-based cookery tasks require an intermediate vessel of some sort. That is where the Dutch oven and its cousin, the camp stove, come in. Although they are more than willing to do your bidding on cooktop or in oven, it is with pit, fire, ember, and coal that these vessels come into their own. Now, a Dutch oven is a cast iron or aluminum vessel with a tight-fitting lid. In purebred models, there's usually 2 loop ears for lifting and sometimes a wire bail for suspending on a jack, crane, or chain. A camp stove is also cast metal, but there are legs, usually 3, and a lip around the edge of the lid, both features designed to facilitate the placement of hot coals. Now, although aluminum models offer heat absorption that's quick and lightness, they react to a lot of different foods and they melt when they hit about 900 degrees, which is easily attained inside a fireplace or a pit. Iron, on the other hand, is extremely dense, so it holds heat well. It can be treated to not react with food, and it doesn't melt till it hits about 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Cast iron is also cheap, so you can afford to own one in every size. Now, ever wonder why somebody would call a pot an oven? Well, if the only heat source you have is a fire and you find yourself a metal vessel to roast, bake, or simmer in, why not call it an oven? As for the Dutch part, I'm pretty sure it has to do with Abraham Darby. Darby was an English Quaker who studied the Dutch processes for casting iron in molds made of compressed sand. Back in England, he perfected these methods and started mass-producing cast iron pieces, which were needed by England's various colonial interests, including ours. Since he was inspired by the Dutch, he may have called these vessels Dutch ovens, but I think it more likely he would have called them English ovens or maybe Darby cookers. I think it's far more likely that when it came to supplying the 13 colonies with Dutch ovens, the Dutch East India Company undercut the English manufacturers through their colony, New Amsterdam, which later became New York. But however they got their name, one thing is for sure, the settling of America would never have been possible without the Dutch oven. The problem with iron and most steels, for which iron is the main ingredient, is that they react with water and oxygen, creating a brand new substance called iron oxide, aka rust. Given enough time, air, and moisture, a once useful implement, like, well, whatever this used to be, will completely convert into rust and simply crumble away. Rust never sleeps, you know. Now, the best way to stop rust, is to keep it from happening in the first place by keeping air away. There's one in every junk pile. Paint would do the trick, as would a thin layer of another metal. Galvanized steel, for instance, has been coated in thin layers of zinc, which, being toxic, makes a lousy cooking surface. Carbon, however, is a really great cooking surface. It's non-toxic, and it's something that we can easily bring to the party. I think this one's probably seen its last party. Rest in peace. This is a molecule of fat, or to be more exact, it is a fatty acid composed of a long chain of carbons with little bonding points. Now, these bonding points are filled with hydrogens at this point, which means that this is a saturated fat. Now, if we were to put this in a hot oven and just leave it there, eventually it would start to chemically decompose. Slowly, and with a good bit of smoke and stinkiness, the hydrogens and whatever other molecules were along for the ride inside the fat would burn away, leaving us with a layer of good old-fashioned carbon. And that carbon, if lubed occasionally with cooking oil, which is conveniently hydrophobic, will grant our iron the protection it needs. Time to take the cure. First step, a good washing in hot, soapy water. If your pan is used, this will, of course, help to remove any foreign matter. If it's new, this will help to remove the food-grade wax that iron pieces are coated in to keep them from rusting during shipping. Once clean and thoroughly dry, smear on a thin layer of fat. Although peanut and vegetable oils are okay, I find that shortening is a lot easier to deal with. Now, to produce a proper layer of carbon rather than a nasty tangle of gooey plastic-like polymers, you have got to get this on very, very even, and you have to get it very thin. Just use your fingers to massage it all over the vessel, inside and out, top, bottom, lid top, lid bottom, everything. The only thing you don't have to worry about is the wire bail if you have one, because that's made out of a different kind of steel. Now, the real magic takes place when we apply some heat, and I like to use oh bother. Since the curing process can create a fair amount of smoke, the grill may actually be the perfect place to do this. Now, if we were using an oven, I'd be shooting for 350, but as long as you can maintain, say, between 325 and 375, we'll be okay. Dutch oven, upside down in the middle. We'll need some kind of spacer, so I've got just a chipped beef can that I took the bottom out of. That'll go there. Lid goes on top. We will use as indirect a heat as is possible by firing just the front and the back elements. There. Let this cook for 1 hour, then cool in place. Once your Dutch oven is cured, you are in possession of perhaps the most versatile cooking vessel the world has ever known. Long simmering dishes, like beans or stew, can just sit right on the hearth and percolate to the radiant heat. Baking, however, sometimes requires direct contact, and planting your Dutch oven right on top of the fire can be tough because a fully loaded 5-quart model can weigh upwards of 15 pounds. So what I like to do is take advantage of the hearth and just drag a few coals right out on top and... Oh, hi, guys. You remember my attorneys, Itchy and Twitchy? Now, you guys cannot complain about this, okay? My hearth is a nice wide slab of rock. I've got some sand to control the coals, a fire extinguisher, and... What you doing, Itchy? I'm sorry, you're Twitchy. You're Itchy. What's this? Carbon monoxide? But I've been doing this for years. I've never had any troubles before. Well, I guess there could be some trace carbon monoxide released into the air, but, you know, I could open a window for ventilation and I could, oh, bother. Although I will miss the romance of the hearth, truth is, your big-time competitive Dutch oveners use charcoal briquettes, whose uniform shapes and size make it easy to dole out specific levels of heat. But not just any briquette will do. No, your average specimen contains nasty stuff like borax, nitrates, even petroleum products. All natural briquettes contain nothing but semi-carbonized wood and a touch of starch to hold it all together. Now, here's another page from the pros. Instead of cooking on a grill, which would be just fine, the big boys cook on folding metal tables like this, which are cheap and darn handy, seeing as how they are fireproof and portable. Now, the best ignition option is a chimney starter, which we have already loaded up here. We have a few pieces of newsprint, lightly drizzled with vegetable oil here, and that will provide the low constant flame necessary to bring this all ablaze. I can't bake in a Dutch oven without thinking about the old miners and prospectors of the Old West, who supposedly never left home without a Dutch oven strapped onto the mule someplace. In fact, those guys became famous for a specific style of bread that was leavened with a wild starter that they kept in pouches around their necks. Not only did these wild yeast and bacteria provide leavening and a lot of flavor, I think they probably also acted as personal defense against, you know, wolves and bears and things like that. Anyway, these breads became known as sourdoughs and, of course, are famous to this day. We are going to use commercial yeast in order to have something that's a little more reliable. So I have here 17.5 ounces by weight of bread flour. To that, we will add a mere quarter of a teaspoon of commercial active dry yeast. And yes, that will be enough. 2.5 teaspoons, which is just shy of a tablespoon, of kosher salt. I just kind of mix that up. And then add 12 ounces of filtered water. And I say filtered because a lot of municipal water supplies have a lot of chlorine in them, and chlorine is pretty vicious stuff to yeast. You could also, if you must, use bottled water, but whatever it is, it needs to be chlorine-free. And just kind of knead it around until most of the flour has been absorbed. It'll be very sticky, that's why I'm using a glove. There. That looks good. Cover with a little plastic wrap just to keep out the dust and whatnot. And leave this on your counter for quite a while. How long? Well, how does 19 hours sound to you? That sounds like a lot. I know. Why so long? Well, it has to do with our old friend gluten. You remember gluten, that elastic and plastic meshwork that happens whenever we mix together wheat flour proteins with water. Now, the way that we usually create this, and we need to for bread to rise, is we knead it and we knead it and we knead it. However, agitation is not the only way to create this. We can also do it with good old-fashioned time, which also creates a lot more flavor. So, 19 hours it is. Well, I kind of thought the power would be back on by now. So let's bake. Well, let's see. Some butter, some eggs, and some milk will help us in our endeavor. You know, most modern refrigerators have sufficient insulation to protect your food for at least a few hours in the case of a power outage. It helps to have the refrigerator thoroughly packed with food, and it helps to keep the door closed. Cheers. You know, in the Limousin region of France, the abundant cherry crop is celebrated with clafoutis, a dish that's a cross between a pie, a custard, and a pancake. Most Americans won't go near it because it sounds like something you'd have to get a shot for. If your 12 ounces of cherries are frozen, let them thaw and drain for several minutes. You don't want all that excess fluid in the dish. Of course, if your power's gone out, this will probably happen a lot quicker than you would ordinarily think. If you have fresh cherries on hand, rinse, stem, and pit them. Or don't. I understand in France, sometimes they just spit them out as they eat. As for your Dutch oven, you will want to thoroughly butter the sides and the bottom of a 5-quart. Then turn your attention to the batter. It is a simple stirred batter. It actually reminds me of a pastry cream. And whisk together 2 eggs with 1/4 cup of sugar until the mixture is frothy and the eggs just start to lighten in color. There. Now stir in 1/2 cup of milk. Fully integrate that. And also add just a teaspoon of vanilla extract. Follow that with 1/2 cup of all-purpose flour. Now, I usually weigh flour when baking, but with this recipe, it does not have to be exact, so volume will be fine. There, that batter looks good. Now, the cherries are the next step. They are drained, and they will go into the Dutch oven. And just kind of push them around till they evenly cover the bottom. There, that looks good. The batter goes on top. There we go. And this heads to the heat. Notice that I have added a flame-proof mat to my setup, a fireplace shovel for coals, heat-proof gauntlets, and Old Red. Now, 18 to 19 red-hot coals go right in the middle of the table. Now, if I was using a camp oven with legs, I'd be able to put that right over the coals, but I'm not. I'm using a Dutch oven, so I'm going to build a rack with 4 bricks and just a rack out of my oven. Place on the clafoutis, put a piece of foil across the mouth to keep ashes out, and place on the lid. And then you're going to need more coals right on top. 25 minutes later, pull the lid and allow the clafoutis to cook another 5 minutes uncovered. Rest off the heat for half an hour. Serve with perhaps a sprinkle of confectioner sugar or a dollop of whipped cream, and you've got yourself a tasty breakfast item. At room temperature, you can serve it like a pie for dessert anytime. Oh, and if you don't have cherries, you could try apricots or maybe figs. Since the power is still out, it's relatively early, and there's charcoal glowing, let's contemplate the hoe cake, a cornmeal application first taught to English settlers by the Narragansett Indians, who called it nokahik. Now, the dish confounded the settlers at first because the cornmeal called for doesn't function in any way, shape, or form like wheat flour. It doesn't have the right proteins to form gluten, and it's got no respect for yeast. The software is simple. 1 cup of our cornmeal, 2 teaspoons of baking powder, 1, 2, not baking soda. We'll go 3/4 of a teaspoon of kosher salt, 3/4 of a cup of water, and 1 solitary egg. There we go. Now whisk that together. Now, basically, we want this to look kind of like a loose pancake batter. Come to think of it, this is a pancake. Last ingredient, 1/2 cup of either fresh or frozen and thawed corn kernels. There. Although hoe cakes can cook on just about any old griddle, if you've got yourself a Dutch camp oven, you don't need a griddle. Just turn it upside down and place 22 hot, ashy coals on the bottom, which is now the top. Then turn over your lid and set it on top of those legs, making a griddle. Let it heat for about 10 minutes or until it hits 425 to 450, anywhere in that range. Then lube it up with a little bit of oil. Do this quickly, by the way. And ladle on the goodness. And I usually cook about 3 at a time because it's easier to flip them that way. Depending on the exact heat of your griddle, they'll need to cook 2 to 3 minutes on each side. Then they'll be nice, golden brown, and delicious. Benjamin Franklin once wrote that nokahiks or hoe cakes were finer than any English Yorkshire pudding, and I intend to agree. When you add a little maple syrup, they are absolutely late night good eats. Well, it's been 19 hours, and the power is still out. Perfect. Well, at least, our dough looks good. But it's time to punch this down. It's the technical phrase, although no punching is necessary. This is going to be really gooey on top, so a bit of flour will be a good thing. And then just kind of fold it over on itself. See how it's stuck to the bowl? A little more flour in there around the sides. Just pull it away and fold it over on itself a few times. Try to redistribute some of those big gas bubbles. There, this time I'm going to cover it with a tea towel instead of the plastic, and we'll let this sit and stew for another 15 minutes. Okay, time to actually form this into a loaf. Nice and springy, a little on the sticky side. So we'll put a little flour on the counter and turn it out. Now the goal is to just form it into a loaf by folding the sides into the middle, kind of like making a jellyfish. Round it off a little bit, and then we're going to move it back into the towel. But we're going to need a little more kind of a heavy-duty lubrication here. So a little cornmeal go down on the towel. Notice I'm putting it on one end of the towel, a little more cornmeal, and then fold the towel over. Set your timer for 2 hours. When you're about half an hour out, go ahead and spread out 20 to 24 hot coals on your table. Now, if you're using a camp oven, you don't have to build the rack, but I'm using a Dutch oven here, which I'm going to allow to heat for 30 minutes. Now, this looks good. Just going to roll it over so that the seam is up, what's left of the seam, and evacuate to the heat. Carefully remove the lid and basically just flop the bread in, cornmeal and all. Don't worry. Place it in the center, relid, and then you're going to need more coals. This time about 20 right on top. You're going to let this bake for 45 minutes or until the internal temperature of the loaf hits between 210 and 212 degrees. Instant Read's the tool for that job. This is good to go. When your bread is ready to come out, and this one definitely is, just carefully scoop it out and get it onto a cooling rack so that the interior can finish setting. Now, in the first few moments, you'll notice kind of a snap, crackle, and pop as the outer crust starts to shrink. Bring the mic in. Bring the mic in. Well, as you can see and smell, and hopefully will soon taste, Dutch oven baking has a lot to offer the home cook. And it looks like I may be doing it for some time. See you next time on Good Eats.